How did a city born in a swamp rise to become the heartbeat of jazz, the soul of Mardi Gras, and a symbol of resilience? Welcome to the extraordinary story of New Orleans. The history of New Orleans began in 1718, when Jean-Baptiste Le Moyen de Bienville, a French-Canadian explorer, founded the settlement on behalf of France. Positioned near the mouth of the Mississippi River, the site was chosen for its strategic location, serving as a gateway for trade and a crucial military outpost to secure French claims in North America. The settlement was named in honor of Philippe II, Duke of Orléans, the regent of France, symbolizing its importance to the French crown. Despite its promising location, New Orleans faced immense challenges from the outset. The swampy terrain, prone to flooding and disease, made construction and habitation difficult. Settlers encountered outbreaks of malaria and yellow fever, as well as food shortages and conflicts with indigenous groups who resisted encroachment on their lands. However, the potential for economic gain through control of the Mississippi River kept French colonial administrators invested in the city's development. French colonial authorities began constructing rudimentary infrastructure to establish a functional settlement. Levees were built along the riverbanks to protect against flooding, and drainage canals were dug to make the land arable. Despite these efforts, early New Orleans remained vulnerable to natural disasters and poor living conditions. Yet, these early engineering projects laid the groundwork for the extensive flood control systems that would come to define the city in later centuries. The arrival of enslaved Africans in the early 18th century transformed New Orleans both economically and culturally. These individuals were forced to work on plantations and infrastructure projects, including the maintenance of levees and canals. Their agricultural knowledge, particularly in rice cultivation, proved invaluable to the colony's survival. Over time, African traditions blended with French customs, contributing to the unique Creole culture that emerged in New Orleans. This cultural fusion included language, cuisine, music, and religious practices that set the city apart from other colonial settlements. New Orleans was diverse from its inception. In addition to French settlers and enslaved Africans, the city attracted indigenous peoples, free people of color, and settlers from other European nations. The city's location at the crossroads of trade routes facilitated the exchange of goods, ideas, and traditions, fostering a dynamic and cosmopolitan atmosphere. Indigenous groups, such as the Choctaw and Natchez, often traded with settlers, despite intermittent conflicts, adding to the cultural complexity of the region. The French implemented the Code Noir, or Black Code, to regulate the treatment of enslaved individuals and free people of color. While the Code Noir imposed harsh restrictions on enslaved people, it also granted certain rights, such as the ability to purchase freedom. This legal framework enabled the emergence of a free black population in New Orleans, which would become a significant and influential community in the city's history. The economy of early New Orleans revolved around trade, agriculture, and resource extraction. The Mississippi River served as a vital artery for transporting goods such as timber, fur, and agricultural produce to international markets. The Port of New Orleans became a key hub in the French colonial trade network, connecting North America to the Caribbean, Africa, and Europe. This economic activity attracted merchants, artisans, and laborers, gradually increasing the settlement's population. By the mid-18th century, New Orleans had grown into a modest yet bustling town. The construction of the Ursuline Convent in 1727 marked a milestone in the city's development. The convent not only served as a religious institution, but also provided education and health care, addressing critical needs within the community. The presence of Catholic institutions underscored the city's religious identity, which remained closely tied to French Catholic traditions. However, New Orleans was far from a stable or prosperous colony. The city's remote location and challenging environment strained resources, and its reliance on enslaved labor created deep social division. Additionally, France's colonial ambitions were increasingly challenged by rival European powers, setting the stage for geopolitical upheaval. In 1762, the Treaty of Fontainebleau transferred Louisiana from France to Spain, marking the end of the first phase of French rule. This secret treaty was part of a broader strategy to strengthen France's alliance with Spain against Britain during the 7 Years' War. The transition to Spanish rule was met with resistance from local settlers, many of whom were deeply attached to their French identity and customs. Despite initial unrest, Spanish governance would prove instrumental in shaping the future of New Orleans. The Spanish brought administrative reforms, improved infrastructure, and a more organized approach to urban planning. Their influence would leave a lasting legacy on the city's architecture, legal system, and cultural landscape. New Orleans' birth as a French colony laid the foundation for its unique identity as a city shaped by multiple cultures, traditions, and historical force. From its humble beginnings as a swampy outpost, the city began its journey toward becoming a vibrant and resilient cultural powerhouse. The transition to Spanish rule in 1763 marked a turning point for New Orleans, as Spain inherited a city defined by its strategic location, but plagued by instability. The Spanish saw immense potential in New Orleans and embarked on an ambitious program to stabilize and develop the settlement. Through infrastructure improvements, legal reforms, and fostering cultural diversity, Spanish rule reshaped the city and laid the groundwork for its future as a cultural and economic powerhouse. Under Spanish governance, New Orleans experienced a level of stability that had eluded it during its early French colonial years. Spanish administrators focused on organizing the city's chaotic legal and civic systems. The introduction of Spanish colonial laws, including those that allowed enslaved individuals to purchase their freedom, created new dynamics within the population. This legal framework, while far from equitable, fostered the growth of a free black community that would play a central role in New Orleans' cultural evolution. Spanish officials also established a more efficient tax system and expanded public services, including the creation of fire brigades and public hospitals. These measures addressed long-standing issues and contributed to the city's resilience against natural disasters and health crises. This period of governance also saw an emphasis on urban planning, with streets being widened and public squares redesigned to create a more orderly and functional city. Two catastrophic fires in 1788 and 1794 reshaped the physical landscape of New Orleans, destroying much of its original French architecture. In response, Spanish authorities implemented strict building codes requiring the use of fire-resistant materials such as brick and stucco. This led to the construction of iconic structures like the Cabildo and the Presbytere, whose Spanish architectural elements, arched windows, wrought iron balconies, and interior courtyards remain defining features of the French Quarter today. These fires also underscored the city's vulnerability to disaster, prompting investments in fire prevention and infrastructure improvements. The architectural transformation that followed contributed to New Orleans' unique visual identity, blending French and Spanish influences into a cohesive aesthetic. During the Spanish era, New Orleans grew into a thriving port city. Its position at the mouth of the Mississippi River made it a vital hub for trade between North America, the Caribbean, and Europe. Agricultural exports such as sugar and tobacco surged, driven by the labor of enslaved people. The port bustled with activity, connecting the interior United States to international markets and solidifying New Orleans' role as a linchpin of transatlantic commerce. Spain's policies encouraged immigration, bringing settlers from diverse backgrounds, including Canary Islanders, Isleños, Germans, and Acadians, later known as Cajuns. These groups added to the city's cultural mosaic, each contributing traditions, languages, and cuisines that enriched the local culture. The arrival of refugees from Saint-Domingue, modern-day Haiti, following the Haitian Revolution, further diversified the population, introducing elements of Haitian culture, such as voodoo spirituality, Creole cuisine, and music. One of the most significant legacies of Spanish rule was the expansion of the free black community. Spanish laws allowed enslaved individuals to earn wages and save money to buy their freedom, leading to the establishment of a vibrant class of free people of color. This community became a cornerstone of New Orleans' social and cultural fabric, excelling in trades, arts, and civic leadership. Free people of color established schools, businesses, and social organizations, creating opportunities for economic and social mobility. Their contributions to the arts, particularly in music and dance, laid the foundation for New Orleans' rich cultural traditions. The blending of African, French, and Spanish influences during this period set the stage for the city's emergence as a global cultural capital. Spanish rule reinforced Catholicism as the dominant religion in New Orleans. Churches were rebuilt, and religious festivals flourished, blending Catholic traditions with local customs. This era also saw the formalization of Mardi Gras as a festive season, with parades and masked balls becoming integral parts of the city's social calendar. These celebrations reflected New Orleans' unique ability to merge solemnity with revelry, creating traditions that endure to this day. By the end of the Spanish era, New Orleans had transformed from a struggling French outpost into a bustling and cosmopolitan city. Its population had grown significantly, its infrastructure had been modernized, and its cultural identity had taken root. In 1800, Spain returned Louisiana to France under the Treaty of San Ildefonso, setting the stage for the Louisiana Purchase and New Orleans' integration into the United States. This transition marked the beginning of yet another chapter in the city's remarkable history. The Louisiana Purchase of 1803 marked a seismic shift in the history of New Orleans, bringing the city under the control of the United States. This integration was both a political and cultural challenge. The French-speaking Creole population resisted assimilation into the predominantly English-speaking Protestant United States. This cultural tension created a distinct identity for New Orleans, setting it apart as a city that maintained its European traditions while navigating its new American reality. New Orleans quickly emerged as one of the most important economic hubs in the United States. Positioned at the mouth of the Mississippi River, the city served as a gateway for goods moving between the interior of the country and international markets. Steamboats filled the bustling docks, loaded with cotton, sugar, and other agricultural products destined for Europe and the Caribbean. The city's economic success was deeply tied to the labor of enslaved individuals. By the early 19th century, New Orleans had become one of the largest markets for the domestic slave trade in the United States. Enslaved men, women, and children were auctioned in public squares and private markets, fueling the plantation economy of the South. The wealth generated by this system enriched a small elite, while deepening social and racial inequalities that left a lasting legacy. Despite these harsh realities, the port's growth brought an influx of people and culture. Immigrants from Ireland, Germany, and Italy arrived in significant numbers, joining the city's Creole, African American, and Caribbean population. Each group contributed to the vibrant cultural mosaic that defined New Orleans, adding their languages, cuisines, and traditions to the city's identity. While its economic role was undeniable, New Orleans also thrived as a cultural powerhouse. The city's unique blend of African, European, and Caribbean influences gave rise to a cultural renaissance that would shape its identity for generations. Music was at the heart of this transformation. Enslaved Africans brought rhythmic and melodic traditions that merged with French and Spanish styles to create new musical forms. Congo Square, a public gathering place, became a focal point for this cultural exchange, where enslaved individuals and free people of color would gather to drum, dance, and sing on Sundays. The roots of jazz can be traced to this era, as these musical traditions evolved into a distinct genre that blended improvisation with syncopated rhythms. This cultural innovation foreshadowed the explosion of jazz in the 20th century, with New Orleans as its epicenter. Dance halls, street parades, and private gatherings showcased the city's love for music, setting the stage for its global reputation as a cradle of jazz. The Civil War, 1861-1865, brought significant upheaval to New Orleans. Early in the war, Union forces captured the city in 1862, securing control of the Mississippi River and cutting off a vital supply line for the Confederacy. Unlike many southern cities, New Orleans was spared the widespread destruction of war, allowing its infrastructure and economy to recover more quickly after the conflict ended. However, the abolition of slavery upended the city's social and economic structures. Formerly enslaved individuals faced new opportunities and challenges during Reconstruction, 1865-1877. Freedmen schools and churches became vital institutions for the African American community, fostering education and solidarity. Meanwhile, the city grappled with political turmoil and racial tensions as efforts to expand civil rights for African Americans were met with fierce resistance from white supremacists and Confederate sympathizers. Despite these challenges, New Orleans retained its cultural vitality. Reconstruction-era laws briefly allowed African Americans to participate in government and business, leading to a period of progress and creativity. However, this progress was undermined by the rise of Jim Crow laws in the late 19th century, which enforced racial segregation and curtailed the rights of black citizens. The antebellum and Reconstruction eras also saw significant architectural and urban development in New Orleans. The French Quarter, with its narrow streets and ironwork balconies, remained a focal point of the city's identity. Meanwhile, new neighborhoods such as the Garden District emerged, showcasing grand mansions built in Greek Revival and Italianate style. These neighborhoods reflected the wealth and aspirations of the city's elite, while working-class districts housed the diverse immigrant communities that fueled New Orleans' growth. Public infrastructure projects, including levees, canals, and streetcar lines, expanded during this period, laying the groundwork for the city's future development. However, the reliance on levees to manage the Mississippi River also created vulnerabilities, as the city's growth encroached further into low-lying areas prone to flooding. The 20th century marked a period of profound transformation for New Orleans, solidifying its reputation as a cultural and artistic capital while facing significant social and economic challenges. Known for its resilience and creativity, the city embraced modernity while preserving its rich heritage, creating a dynamic environment where tradition and innovation coexisted. By the early 20th century, New Orleans had become synonymous with jazz, a revolutionary musical genre that captured the spirit of the city. Musicians like Louis Armstrong, Jelly Roll Morton, and Sidney Bechet emerged as pioneers, blending African rhythms, blues, and European instrumentation into a uniquely American sound. Jazz clubs flourished in neighborhoods like Storyville, where performers entertained diverse audiences and pushed the boundaries of musical expression. As jazz gained national and international acclaim, it became a defining feature of New Orleans' identity. The music born from the city's cultural melting pot, embodied the resilience and creativity of its people. Festivals like the New Orleans Jazz and Heritage Festival later celebrated this legacy, drawing visitors from around the world to experience the city's vibrant musical traditions firsthand. Mardi Gras, rooted in French Catholic traditions, evolved into one of the world's most famous celebrations during the 20th century. The festival, characterized by elaborate parades, masked balls, and street parties, became a symbol of New Orleans' joie de vivre and cultural diversity. The introduction of new parade, crews, and the expansion of festivities drew larger crowds each year, transforming Mardi Gras into a global phenomenon. The festival's inclusive spirit reflected the city's ethos, bringing together residents and visitors of all backgrounds to celebrate life and community. Mardi Gras also became an economic boon for the city, generating significant revenue through tourism and related industries. While New Orleans thrived culturally, its economy underwent significant changes. The decline of the shipping industry and the rise of air and rail transportation shifted the city's economic landscape. Industries like oil and gas emerged as new drivers of growth, but economic inequality and racial segregation persisted, shaping the lives of many residents. The civil rights movement brought both progress and tension to New Orleans. Activists fought for desegregation in schools, public spaces, and businesses, challenging entrenched systems of discrimination. While victories were achieved, such as the integration of public schools in the 1960s, the struggle for equality highlighted the city's complex social dynamics. Efforts to preserve New Orleans' architectural and cultural heritage gained momentum during the 20th century. The French Quarter, threatened by urban development, became the focus of preservation campaigns that emphasized its historical and aesthetic value. These efforts ensured that the city's distinctive Creole townhouses, wrought iron balconies, and cobblestone streets remained intact, attracting tourists and fostering local pride. The rise of tourism as a major industry helped sustain the city's economy, with visitors drawn to its music, cuisine, and historic charm. However, the influx of tourists also brought challenges, including the commercialization of cultural traditions and the displacement of long-time residents from historic neighborhoods. By the end of the 20th century, New Orleans had firmly established itself as a global cultural capital. Its music, festivals, and architecture were celebrated worldwide, while its people continued to navigate the complexities of modern urban life. As the city entered the 21st century, it carried forward a legacy of resilience, creativity, and cultural richness, poised to face new challenges while preserving its unique identity.